Ready to go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Diane Hevler, and I'm an infectious disease physician and scientist and director of the AIDS Research Institute, the umbrella organization for all HIV activities at UCSF. On behalf of my co-chair and dear colleague, Dr. Monica Gandhi, who's director of CFAR and Ward 86, we welcome you to the 2021 World AIDS Day program. A special welcome to Chancellor Hallgood, Dean King, Chair of Medicine Wachter, Drs. Levy and Bolberding, and their families. World AIDS Day was a brainchild of a San Franciscan, James Bunn, a journalist who pitched the idea at WHO in 1988. Since then, every year on December 1st, all around the world, there are events to bring awareness to HIV. Scientific advances have been stunning, and the challenges ahead remain daunting. Certainly, the AIDS pandemic is not over. 38 million people living with HIV, 1.5 million new infections every year. We at UCSF remain steadfast in our commitment to overcome this disease. After all, we were among the first to respond, the first to describe the virus, the first to open a clinic for HIV, the first to say we need to treat everyone, the first to start a substantial cure program, the first to launch a citywide effort to end the pandemic, and the first to seriously invest in societal and social science aspects and behavioral aspects of this disease. In our two-part program today, we will first do tributes to UCSF giants, Drs. Levy and Bolberding. Then we will spotlight a few of our investigators working on the cutting edge of AIDS research. And if we could advance next slide, please. So Dr. Levy was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware. He had a twin brother, Stuart. Note the identity ruse on the upper right-hand screen, who himself became one of the greats in drug resistance and infectious diseases. His sister Ellen, shown in the lower left, is a physician and practices in the Dominican Republic. Jay graduated with high honors from Wesleyan University, went to Paris for a research fellowship. He earned his MD from Columbia and did his residency at Penn. He worked at the National Cancer Institute and then came to UCSF in 1972. He met his incredible wife, Sharon, shortly thereafter, and they were married in Philadelphia. You will hear more about Jay's many scholarly contributions and accolades, but let me tell you a little bit more about Jay. Next slide, please. Education and mentoring his trainees have always been a central focus for Jay. His trainees have started virology laboratories around the world as a result of his efforts. Let me read you a quotation from one of his trainees and now very successful scientist, Susan Barnett. Jay's vibrant, productive, and highly collaborative laboratory was where I wanted to be doing research. So many of the early observations made in Jay's lab were seminal in setting future research directions in the HIV field, and I will forever be grateful to him for inspiring me to redirect my career path to infectious diseases and HIV and AIDS research. Jay's enormously generous and always providing words of encouragement, for which I have personally appreciated. Next slide. What you may not know about Jay is he is truly a Renaissance man. He's fluent in 5 languages: French, Italian, Hebrew, Spanish, and English. In 1987, he went to Africa for 3 months, met with health professionals on the front line and some very important creatures. He's an intellectual. Look at the essay, Conversations with Samuel Beckett. He's an artist. He designs these hearts on the upper right, a connoisseur of old cars, and is active in international organizations, fulfilling his lifelong ambition of being both a scientist and a diplomat. He has had a profound influence, not only on the science, but on a generation of scientists. Monica, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here to pay tribute to these great scientists. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Paul Bolberding and some things that you actually may not know, because I think we know a lot about both of these great scientists. So Paul Bolberding, shown here on the left as a very young baby, grew up in Minnesota, and he had 5 children in his family, one of which has passed, but he's very close to all 4 of his remaining siblings. And very prominently, he has always loved animals. He's always been good with animals. And this is a picture 2 years in a row of him winning the 4-H club championship for his very amazing heifer that you can see here pictured. This is, again, 2 years in a row. Next slide, please. In terms of what his background was prior to coming to UCSF, Paul went to the University of Chicago for college and was, like many people at Chicago, thinking about a career in humanities, but then went to the University of Minnesota eventually for medical school, and there worked with Dr. Charlie Muldow, who is a great scientist in the field of retrovirology. So this is prior to the description of HIV. He's always been interested in retroviruses. Then he went to the University of Utah for residency. We share a Utah connection, but always wanted to come to the West and was angling to come to San Francisco for his fellowship, where he did and came for his oncology fellowship and was a fellow in Dr. Jay Levy's laboratory, where again worked on retroviruses, his longstanding interest. His academic accomplishments will be summarized by our chancellor and dean and chair, but wanted to give a little more aspects of his personal. Here he is in Kenya on the bottom left, where he, through his CFAR accomplishments, helped set up a laboratory. And here he is, how dedicated he is to his family. On the upper left is his son, Ben, and on the bottom right is at his daughter's Emily's wedding. And he loves animals. It's too hard to have dogs right now, but he has these beautiful cats. Next slide. And in terms of more of the personal, because that is so much of who Paul is. He met his physician wife, Dr. Molly Cook, when they were on the CRI rotation, the very hard rotation in the Cancer Research Institute during UCSF residency. And they have these 3 wonderful and accomplished children, Alex, Ben, and Emily. And then on the upper right side is showing you some of what Paul's doing during his emeritus time, which is caring for his granddaughter, Madeline, and his second grandchild is due this week. And he loves animals, travel, family, and it's really been an honor for me to have been mentored by Paul Voberding since I came here in 1996. I consider him a long-term clinical mentor. Thank you very much. So the next part of our program is we're very honored to have Dr. Anthony Fauci pay a lovely tribute to Drs. Levy and Paul Voberding. He was going to be here live, but then Omicron variant was described on Thanksgiving Day, and he is busy saving the world. So he has recorded really lovely remarks that we're going to show you here now in this next video. Thank you.
It is a great pleasure and in fact an honor on this World AIDS Day commemoration to have the opportunity to pay tribute to 2 individuals, Jay Levy and Paul Voberding, who over the 40 years that I have known them have become valued colleagues and friends. Although we lived on separate coasts, we were brought together in common purpose 40 years ago when our country and the world were challenged with what would become an historic era in the annals of public health. We shared a bond that few people who are active today in medicine and science can say that they have experienced. We were there at the beginning, and we responded literally from the very first days of the pandemic. The early years of Jay's career paralleled much more closely my own. He finished his residency at UCSF in 1971, and I completed my chief residency at the New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center, now Weill Cornell Medicine, in 1972, 1 year later. Paul, the young guy among us, was just graduating from the University of Chicago. Over the next 9 to 10 years, Jay and I pursued careers in immunology and molecular virology, respectively, while Paul was finishing medical school at the University of Minnesota, completing his medical residency and fellowship in oncology, and preparing to build a division of oncology at the San Francisco General Hospital in the summer of 1981. And then, in that summer of 1981, the careers and lives of all 3 of us changed dramatically. We all got swept up in the whirlwind of HIV/AIDS, which was not called AIDS at the time, nor did we have any idea what HIV was. And so, let me give you my perspective from the East Coast on what I had witnessed happening here at UCSF back then, at the San Francisco General Hospital, and the San Francisco community in general. Among other UCSF colleagues, Jay and Paul emerged over the years as truly iconic figures in the basic sciences and clinical care and investigation surrounding persons with HIV. To appreciate the full magnitude of their contributions, let us go back to the early 1980s, when San Francisco was the epicenter of the HIV epidemic in this country. As we know, previously healthy young individuals were dying despite our best efforts to provide all the supportive treatments available to us at the time. There were no established HIV centers available to provide the crucial care that was so urgently needed. And then, in 1983, Paul, Don Abrams, and the late Constance Woofsy founded the now legendary Ward 86. This was the first interdisciplinary AIDS-dedicated inpatient clinic in the world. With the subsequent expansion to Ward 5B, the San Francisco model, as it was called, became renowned as the best HIV patient care model in the world. Now, nearly 40 years later, this comprehensive model is the gold standard of interdisciplinary care around the world for complex diseases ranging from cancer to Alzheimer's disease and many more. And so what happened here at UCSF was truly historic. At that time, Cliff Lane, Henry Mazur, and I were deeply immersed in the care of desperately ill AIDS patients at the NIH Clinical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. And so we could fully appreciate even then the groundbreaking and truly transformative work that was being done by Paul and his colleagues here in San Francisco. To this day, I still am in awe of the creativity, the boldness, the risk-taking, and above all, the compassion that went into the creation of the San Francisco model. Concurrent with the cultivation of the San Francisco model was the collaborative environment of San Francisco's AIDS research community that supported Jay Levy and his monumental discovery of HIV in symptomatic patients and in asymptomatic individuals in certain risk groups. Published just a few months after the science papers of Bob Gallo and his colleagues. I often think it's just too bad that the Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology cannot be given to more than 3 persons, or you would have had another Nobel laureate here at UCSF. Over the years, through multiple national and international conferences, workshops, collaborations, and the real camaraderie that was established among the then relatively small group of AIDS researchers in the early 1980s. I formed lifelong friendships with Jay and Paul based on admiration and respect, even though we were on distant coasts of our country. But their work did not stop with Ward 86 or with the discovery of HIV. In the mid-1980s, there was still so much we did not know about HIV treatment. Paul co-directed one of the flagship AIDS clinical trial groups at UCSF, where he led the pivotal ACTG-019 trial that changed clinical practice by demonstrating that the antiretroviral drug AZT was safe and effective in delaying the onset of AIDS in asymptomatic individuals with HIV. The results were truly game-changing. In 1988, Paul became the principal investigator and co-director of the UCSF Gladstone Center for AIDS Research in San Francisco, a national network coordinated by my institute and other NIH institutes. He was instrumental in creating and building the center, which is a premier research institution that also serves as a model for ensuring high standards of ethical research and patient safety. Paul's early leadership in the International AIDS Society, serving as its second president from 1990 to 1992, meant he had to navigate the tumultuous waters of a deadly pandemic, the uneven scientific progress, an understandably frustrated populace, and the repercussions of unpopular political decisions, something that I certainly can understand. In 2012, he became the director of the UCSF AIDS Research Institute and director of research for the UCSF Institute for Global Health Sciences. Under Paul's leadership, the AIDS Research Institute became the home for a unique initiative to cure HIV infection funded by AMFAR, which is the Foundation for AIDS Research. Now, what about Jay? Early in his career, Jay was a staff scientist at the NCI here at the NIH. We conducted research on DNA and RNA cancer viruses. And after moving to UCSF, Jay discovered xenotropic viruses and introduced a new paradigm in virology, an extraordinary accomplishment. Over the next 40 years, Jay and his colleagues at the Laboratory of Tumor and AIDS Virus Research dedicated their efforts to understanding human retroviruses, such as HIV. Not only did he co-discover HIV, but his work also has uncovered a novel immune response that controls HIV infection through the production of an antiviral factor by CD8-positive lymphocytes. But besides his groundbreaking discoveries in HIV research, Jay always has been a valuable voice in scientific discussions, a critical thinker who takes the 40,000 feet approach to science by asking the key, penetrating questions. In addition, he is known as very generous in his mentoring of young scientists. I have always admired that about him, and actually I still do. And so it has been my great pleasure to participate, even in a small way, in this well-deserved tribute to two individuals who have made historic contributions to the field of HIV/AIDS. It is also fitting that we honor them here on the 40th anniversary of their extraordinary journey. Paul and Jay, it has been my pleasure and honor to have interacted and learned from you during the multiple crossroads of this journey. Thank you, and keep up your great work.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci, for those remarkable remarks, and thank you for the work that you are doing in leading the world in the current pandemic around COVID-19. My name is Sam Hoggett. I'm the Chancellor here at UCSF, and it's my job now to add just a few more words to those that you've heard about the remarkable Professor Jay Levy. Before I do that and then introduce Jay to make some comments of his own, I would like to pick up on a theme that Dr. Fauci brought up, and that is the fact that in the early 80s, and I arrived at UCSF from Monash University in Melbourne in 1981, just as the AIDS pandemic was really getting underway, to comment on his remarks that it was a historic era, and investigators who dedicated their lives subsequently to HIV formed a bond. It's a bond that I think was generational shaping, even for those of us who were watching from the periphery and were not directly involved in either AIDS research or therapy. My wife, Jane, was a social worker in the AIDS clinic on Parnassus Avenue in the early 80s. So I had indirect understanding of the toll that the pandemic was taking. But I think watching our colleagues dedicate their lives in new ways gave new meaning to the word collaboration at UCSF. And I think it was not only career defining for those investigators who dedicated their lives to HIV research, but I would say it was institution defining in setting a new culture, a new expectation of what UCSF as a premier public health science university needed to do to keep the world a safer place. Those who dedicated and have dedicated their lives to HIV research, whether it was the community engagement, the advocacy, the basic science, the clinical translational work, or the care, really set the foundation for UCSF some 40 years later to be again a world leader in the response to another viral pandemic. So I just thank Jay and Paul, but also all of the others that are on this program today for their remarkable commitment to a difficult disease, but they're paving the way for UCSF to emerge in the modern era as a truly collaborative institution. So now a few words about Jay. You've heard eloquently from Diane about some of his non-professional achievements and interests, which are truly remarkable. I didn't quite know that he could speak 5 or 6 languages. Makes the rest of us feel somewhat limited. But you've also heard from Dr. Fauci, his remarkable scientific achievements. So I'll be relatively brief, but we'll repeat some of what's been said because it is truly a remarkable career. You've heard that in 1983, Jay independently discovered the AIDS virus that he originally called the AIDS-associated retrovirus. This came following his foundational early work when he discovered that xenotropic viruses introduced a new paradigm in virology. He confirmed that germline transmission of inherited or endogenous retroviruses was possible, and that paved the way for the use of these and related viruses in human gene therapy that is still being scientifically researched today. After the discovery of the virus, Jay very importantly pioneered heat treatment studies that demonstrated how to heat inactivate HIV in clotting factor preparations, an approach that protected many hemophiliacs from HIV and for which he received the Murray Thielen Award from the National Hemophilia Foundation. He was also the first to report the presence of the HIV virus in the brain and bowel and linked the virus presence in those tissues to diseases and symptoms from the presence of the virus. His group was also the first to demonstrate, as Dr. Fauci said, the ability of a CD8 positive lymphocytes in healthy infected people to control HIV replication by a non-cytotoxic mechanism. Jay has published over 600 papers and is the author or editor of 14 books dealing with viruses and immunology. Among them, acclaimed 4-volume series, The Retroviridity, and his seminal sole-authored book, HIV and the Pathogenesis of AIDS, that has now been translated into several languages. Jay is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and the American Academy of Microbiology, to name just a few. He has received numerous prestigious awards at his Wesleyan alma mater, at UCSF, and at other organizations such as the American Foundation for AIDS Research. He is a member and participates in programs of the World Affairs Council and the Council on Foreign Affairs. He is an AIDS advisor in several countries, including India, China, France, Italy, Mexico, Ethiopia, the Dominican Republic, and Thailand. Jay has been truly an outstanding citizen, an outstanding representative for UCSF on the world stage. And it's just an enormous pleasure for me to participate in this ceremony, recognizing his remarkable career and his remarkable contributions. So Jay, I will now turn the Zoom room over to you to make a few remarks.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm overwhelmed by the introduction. Diane, thank you so much. And I have some words to say to Tony if you were here, to remind him of when we first met in 1982 at a meeting organized by Albert Sabin. And we were talking about a very serious disease. No one knew what it was the cause, and so forth. And you, after the many years, were very supportive of our research program here at UCSF. And I have been really so thrilled to see you are of advice and compassion for other epidemics that have happened to the world community. We thank you for your courage and your advice. So this World AIDS Day, it is humbling and gratifying to be honored by this group and to honor my research fellows who worked in HIV/AIDS over the past 40 years. Most of us never suspected that a human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, would be the cause of the disease syndrome. Its identification involved researchers here at UCSF and from the US government, both of which were reluctant to recognize the disease affecting many Americans. It was really the response of the state of California that made a difference. Researchers at UCSF and many throughout the world independently took on the public health challenge and made major discoveries and developed diagnostic and therapeutic approaches to help mitigate the consequences of HIV infection. I'll cite here what Sam said is collaboration at UCSF was fantastic and was a model for AIDS programs throughout this country and elsewhere. Those responses now help to inform current investigators of the most recent COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, again, the lack of early attention to the COVID infection delayed the needed response for controlling this new public health challenge. For those of us who witnessed HIV/AIDS at the beginning, the achievements made in discovering and understanding HIV pathogenesis and developing diagnostic tests and the antiviral therapies are remarkable. They have helped to reduce the deaths from the viral infection so that today, most infected individuals, particularly in economically privileged countries, can survive with normal lifetimes. The fact that an AIDS vaccine has not yet been developed for this viral infection highlights the difficulty we all recognize. When you have an agent that infects an individual and becomes rapidly established within the genetic material of many of the cells in the body. Thus, the goal is to eliminate or control these virus-infected cells. They are agents of the transmission and the disease. In that sense, I remind people that the fields of infectious disease and cancer overlap. The focus is on controlling the pathogenic or disease-causing cell. We have never been faced with this particular biologic activity of a microbe in which a viral infection immediately creates a stable infection and many cells acting as reservoirs in the body are there to continue the agent's presence and its disease. So remember this in terms of many questions. Why do we not have a vaccine for HIV? Remember, when it infects, it becomes part of the body, of the genetic makeup of the cell. And we have to destroy or control those cells. I hope in the future that innovative approaches will consider the known ability of some HIV-exposed individuals. And here's where I see an important direction in the future. They ward off the infection, these exposed individuals, and they're protected from a natural antiviral infection. They are protected by a natural immune response. These HIV-exposed uninfected individuals merit special attention for future approaches at immunotherapy, a vaccine, and a cure. For example, these individuals have what Sam and Diane had mentioned, a CD8 cell antiviral response that does not involve cell killing, but is extremely powerful in controlling HIV so that they have no symptoms and can live a normal lifetime. This CD8 non-cytotoxic antiviral response, which we call CNAR, has been an innate immune response that has been so protective. And I am pleased that the labs of Alex Marson and Jimmy Yee will be continuing the studies of CNAR here at UCSF. I thank the ARI and the AIDS community for giving me and my research colleagues this recognition. I'm particularly pleased to share it with my former student and accomplished HIV/AIDS clinician, Paul Voberding. As mentioned, Paul joined my lab in 1980 as a hem-onc fellow, learning about retroviruses causing immune disorders and cancer in mice. We did not know then that we would soon be working together on a human retrovirus. I'm really very proud of his achievements. My hope is that students today and in the future will become acquainted with the history of HIV/AIDS pandemic and contribute new ideas in its therapy and prevention. Importantly, they will be better prepared to handle the next pandemic that surely will occur as we continue to face the struggle between microparasites and macroparasites that exist together on this planet. Now, before I close, I'm going to surprise everybody. I would like to give a very special thanks to my marvelous wife, Sharon, picture you saw, who has been at my side for these 40 years. She knows well the challenges and the joy that came from these experiences in HIV/AIDS. Thank you so much.